What if I told you that some of Hollywood's most legendary tough guy actors weren't just playing a role, they were living it? Men who walked onto film sets with scars from real battles, fists hardened from street fights, and nerves forged in life-or-death situations. These weren't just performers pretending to be dangerous. They were the kind of men who could end a fight before it even started. And here's the shocking part. One actor's past was so unbelievable that studio executives tried to bury it, terrified audiences would think it was a lie. Today we're uncovering the untold stories behind Hollywood's toughest legends, the stars who didn't just act like warriors on screen, but proved it in the real world. When most people think of Hollywood's toughest stars, they picture towering giants like John Wayne. But the deadliest man ever to step in front of a camera was just 5'5", baby-faced, and often mistaken for too soft for action roles. His name? Audie Murphy. Before Hollywood, Murphy was the most decorated American soldier of World War II. By 19, he had already held off an entire German company alone, wounded and running out of ammo, earning the Medal of Honor. And that was just one of his many combat feats, so unbelievable that when Hollywood adapted his life into Hell and Back, they had to cut some of the truth because audiences wouldn't have believed it. Behind the fame, Murphy lived with demons, nightmares, PTSD, even keeping a loaded pistol under his pillow. But on screen he didn't need to act tough, he already was. But Audie wasn't the only star whose real life was harder than any role he played. The next man's was forged on the open road. Hollywood's king of cool, a daredevil who seemed addicted to danger both on screen and off. Steve McQueen wasn't acting when he played cool, fearless rebels. He was living it. His childhood was rough, his time in the Marines reckless, but it all shaped him into a man addicted to danger. Unlike most stars, McQueen did his own stunts, motorcycles, car chases, even life-threatening scenes that terrified directors. Off-screen, he raced against professionals and nearly won one of the world's toughest endurance races with a broken foot. And when he learned the Manson cult had put him on their hit list, McQueen didn't hire bodyguards. He simply carried a loaded Magnum wherever he went. McQueen didn't pretend to be tough. He proved it every time he got behind the wheel or in front of a camera. The next man on our list was big, towering, relentless, and determined to do his own stunts, even when his body was breaking down. His name? John Wayne. John Wayne wasn't just Hollywood's cowboy. He was built for it. At 6'4" and powerfully athletic, he started as a USC football player and backstage laborer, known for hauling set pieces that took several men to move. Unlike most stars, Wayne insisted on doing his own stunts, even when it left him with cracked ribs or torn ligaments. On the Alamo, he broke ribs in a horsefall, taped himself up, and went right back to work. After cancer surgery that removed a lung and ribs, he still returned to perform his own stunts in The Sons of Katie Elder. Even those who disagreed with him admitted his toughness was real. Kirk Douglas once said, "You can argue with his politics, but don't question his toughness. I've seen him push through pain that would have flattened most men." But while Wayne's toughness came from size and endurance, the next man's was darker. He was an orphan, a drifter, a boxer, and even a prisoner, experiences that gave him a dangerous authenticity Hollywood couldn't fake. Robert Mitchum didn't learn toughness in Hollywood. He learned it on the road. Orphaned young, he drifted across Depression-era America, digging ditches, mining coal, and boxing under the name Jimmy Mitchum, where he earned the broken nose that became part of his look. At one point, he was even arrested for vagrancy and sentenced to a Georgia chain gang. That brutal experience gave him a knowledge of hardship most actors could never fake. On screen, Mitchum didn't posture, he carried a quiet danger that everyone felt. He proved his strength off-screen too. During The Night of the Hunter, he carried actress Shelley Winters through take after take without breaking a sweat. And when he was jailed in 1948 for marijuana possession, a scandal that would have ruined others, Mitchum served his 60 days calmly, then walked out tougher than before. Mitchum once joked, "I've got two acting styles, with and without a horse." But the truth is, his style came from living hard, long before cameras ever found him. The next actor on our list clawed his way up from childhood poverty, so extreme it nearly crushed him, only to become one of the most feared and respected figures in Hollywood. Charles Bronson's toughness wasn't an act, it was survival. One of 15 children, he grew up in crushing poverty, working in Pennsylvania coal mines by age 10. Those years left their mark, the hardened face, the squint, the quiet menace that later made him unforgettable on screen. In World War II, Bronson flew combat missions as an aerial gunner, earning a Purple Heart. Fellow soldiers described him as calm under fire, the kind of man you wanted next to you when things went bad. After the war, he scraped by with brutal jobs in boxing, carrying that real strength into Hollywood. When Bronson threw a punch on screen, it didn't look staged. It looked efficient and dangerous, because he'd fought for real. Even mafia death threats after Death Wish didn't faze him. Offered bodyguards, Bronson refused, saying, "I've lived through too much to worry about that." The next man on this list turned toughness into pure speed and power. Bruce Lee, the fighter who moved faster than cameras could capture. Bruce Lee wasn't just tough. He was lightning in human form. By his teens, he had already trained in Wing Chun, boxing, fencing, and judo, blending them into a style that broke every rule of traditional martial arts. From that mix, he created Jeet Kune Do, a philosophy as much as a fighting style, built around speed, precision, and devastating power. Lee's abilities bordered on the impossible. He could do push-ups on just 2 fingers. His famous 1-inch punch could send grown men flying across a room. And his speed was so unreal that film crews often had to slow down footage just so audiences could actually see his movements. On set, accidents were common. He once hit a stuntman so hard he cracked ribs without even meaning to. Hollywood tried to hold him back, refusing to cast him as a leading man. So Bruce left for Hong Kong, where he became an international superstar, proving the world wrong. Every time he stepped in front of a camera, he wasn't just performing, he was challenging centuries of stereotypes and smashing through them with his fists. Bruce Lee didn't just change movies, he changed the way the world thought about toughness itself. But if Bruce was discipline and speed, the next man was pure volatility. James Caan, an actor who trained like a fighter, lived like a gangster, and exploded with real rage on and off screen. James Caan didn't just play violent men, he lived with the same explosive energy off screen. A black belt in karate, Caan trained under Master Takayuki Kubota, throwing himself into full-contact sparring like a real fighter. That discipline gave him the sharp, dangerous edge audiences saw in The Godfather, where his portrayal of Sonny Corleone felt less like acting and more like instinct. To get into character, Caan even spent time with real mobsters, studying how they moved, spoke, and carried themselves. The result was so authentic, people swore he must have been part of that world himself. And when it came time to film, he didn't pull punches, literally. He broke a co-star's nose during a fight scene, and once decked a paparazzo for photographing his daughter. His temper also spilled into his personal life. Arrested multiple times for assault, Caan brushed it off as just setting boundaries. Directors said he didn't need much direction on set, he only needed room to explode. Among friends, he earned the nickname Jimmy the Shark, because walking into a room with him felt like stepping into a fight that hadn't started yet. The next man on this list sought out pain on purpose. Mickey Rourke, the actor who walked away from stardom to fight in the ring. Mickey Rourke wasn't just an actor, he was a fighter, body and soul. Hollywood once wanted him to be the next De Niro, but Rourke had no interest in playing it safe. At the height of his fame, he walked away from the industry to step into the boxing ring, where he took real punches, suffered real damage, and racked up broken ribs, a shattered nose, and even a split tongue. He trained under legendary coach Freddie Roach and sparred with world champions, not caring that each fight left him more battered than before. He lived in gyms, slept in locker rooms, and even surrounded himself with gangsters, choosing pain and authenticity over Hollywood luxury. By the time he came back to acting, his face was almost unrecognizable from years of blows and botched surgeries. But that was the point. Rourke didn't want to be pretty. He wanted to be real. Every performance dripped with the kind of rawness only someone who had truly lived on the edge could deliver. He once said, "I lost everything, but I didn't sell out." And if Rourke showed what it meant to burn your own path, the next man proved what it meant to stare death in the face and win. Clint Eastwood, the actor who survived a plane crash, swam through shark-infested waters and built a legend of unshakable menace. Clint Eastwood wasn't just the man with no name. He was the man who survived the impossible. Drafted during the Korean War, Eastwood was on a military plane that crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Most men would have drowned, but Eastwood swam over 3 miles through freezing shark-infested waters to reach safety. That brush with death shaped him into someone who didn't blink, didn't flinch, and never backed down. In Hollywood, Eastwood demanded total control. If a producer tried to change his work, Clint didn't negotiate. He threatened. He performed his own stunts, rode wild horses, and endured brutal desert heat while filming westerns. The quiet menace he brought to the screen wasn't an act. It was the same steel that had kept him alive when the ocean tried to take him. Eastwood carried danger into his personal life too. He was known to keep loaded firearms on camping trips and once warned a producer, "Touch the script again and I'll break your hand." When Eastwood gave a look, it was the same stare that froze villains in their tracks on screen, and it came from a place as real as it gets. The next man's toughness came from raw intensity and an explosive temper. Gene Hackman, a Marine who carried his battlefield grit straight into Hollywood. Gene Hackman didn't need acting classes to play hard men. His toughness was forged long before Hollywood. At just 16, he lied about his age to join the Marines. Stationed in China, Hackman earned a reputation as a brawler, taking on bare-knuckle fights whenever he had the chance. After the service, he scraped by with odd jobs: doorman, truck driver, field radio operator, until acting found him. But the Marine grit never left. On set, Hackman was a volcano. His temper was infamous, his presence intimidating. He once dragged a paparazzo into traffic by the collar, and during filming, he broke a wall with his fist in the middle of a take. No special effects needed. Co-stars feared his outbursts, but respected the raw power he brought to every role. Hackman didn't play charming leading men. He didn't care about charm at all. In his own words, "I don't trust charm." What he did trust was discipline, aggression, and commanding respect. And that's exactly what he carried into every film, from The French Connection to Unforgiven. The next name on this list came out of prison, with scars that would make him one of Hollywood's most feared faces: Danny Trejo. Danny Trejo's face tells a story before he ever speaks. Covered in scars and tattoos, he didn't need makeup to play Hollywood's villains because he had already lived it. Trejo grew up in gangs, in and out of juvenile detention, before ending up in some of the toughest prisons in America, including the infamous San Quentin. Inside, he fought his way to the top, becoming boxing champion in both the lightweight and welterweight divisions. But prison also gave him something else, a chance to turn his life around. After getting clean, Trejo started working as a drug counselor, which unexpectedly led him to a film set. A director noticed his intimidating presence and hired him on the spot. From there, Trejo went from convict to one of the most recognizable tough guys in Hollywood. And this toughness wasn't just for show. Trejo survived stabbings, overdoses, and more gang fights than most people could count. Yet despite all that, he uses his fame to inspire others, often giving motivational talks in prisons and schools. When Trejo walks onto a screen, audiences don't see an actor pretending. They see a man who's lived through hell and come out the other side tougher than ever. The next man's toughness was carved out on the battlefield. Charles Durning, a war hero who fought through hell before he ever set foot on a Hollywood stage. Charles Durning wasn't just another Hollywood tough guy, he was a real-life war machine. Drafted into World War II, Durning stormed Omaha Beach on D-Day as part of the first wave. He was shot in the hip, chest, and leg, yet somehow survived the blood-soaked chaos. At one point, he killed enemy soldiers in brutal hand-to-hand combat, then later escaped from a German prisoner camp against impossible odds. By the time he came home, he had earned the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart. But medals couldn't erase what he'd seen. Durning carried deep PTSD for the rest of his life, haunted by memories he rarely spoke about. When he did, he admitted simply, "I don't talk about the war. I can't." Acting became his therapy, but he made one rule: he would never glamorize war. Every role he took was shaped by his truth, that combat isn't glorious, it's survival. On screen, he delivered quiet fury. Off screen, he stayed humble, never letting Hollywood overshadow what really mattered. For the next man, it was forged through revolution, poverty, and backbreaking labor before Hollywood ever noticed him. Anthony Quinn's toughness wasn't built in Hollywood gyms. It came from survival. Born during the Mexican Revolution, his family fled violence and settled in Los Angeles' poorest neighborhoods. By 10, Quinn was already working, hauling meat as a butcher's assistant, sweating on construction sites, and even boxing professionally to support his family. The broken nose he carried for life wasn't makeup, it was real. That raw strength showed on set. In Zorba the Greek, Quinn carried heavy logs by himself, tasks meant for two men. Director Elia Kazan said, "Tony doesn't act tough, he simply is tough." But Quinn wasn't just muscle. He was unafraid to show emotion, mixing brute force with vulnerability. Sophia Loren once said, "Anthony had the body of a warrior and the soul of a poet." Even in his 50s and 60s, he insisted on doing his own stunts, ignoring studio warnings. But the next man on this list wasn't just tough, he was dangerous. A Marine turned actor who carried the scars of war onto the big screen, and whose very presence could shift the atmosphere on a film set. Lee Marvin didn't just play dangerous men, he was one. As a Marine in World War II, he fought in the brutal Pacific Theater and was badly wounded at Saipan, earning a Purple Heart. The injury left him with a hidden limp for life, but also gave his performances a raw authenticity no acting class could teach. Marvin spoke bluntly about combat. Any man who says he enjoyed it is either a liar or a fool. That honesty came through on screen. Directors said his violence looked real because it was swift, ugly, and unromantic. Off camera, Marvin's toughness was legendary. He once got into a bar fight with an entire team of lumberjacks holding his own until police broke it up. The next morning, he showed up on set, bruised but unfazed. The last man on this list showed that sometimes size doesn't matter at all. He stood just 5'5", but in the streets of New York, he learned to fight with a speed and ferocity that made him pound for pound one of Hollywood's hardest hitters. At just 5'5", James Cagney didn't look like a tough guy. But growing up on New York's gang-filled Lower East Side, he had no choice but to fight. He learned to box for survival, developing speed, footwork, and a fighting style built to end a brawl quickly. That real-world toughness carried into his acting. His fight scenes weren't flashy, they were fast and brutal, because he'd lived them. Director Raoul Walsh said, "Jimmy knew how to throw a punch better than any actor I worked with, because he'd thrown plenty for real." Cagney's reputation wasn't just on screen. In Hollywood, people knew he was someone you didn't cross. Bob Hope once joked, "Jimmy would drop you where you stood, then help you up and dust you off." And one of his most famous moments, smashing a grapefruit into Mae Clarke's face in The Public Enemy, wasn't staged, her shock was real. Cagney himself explained it best. "When you're my size, you either learn to handle yourself or you get used to lying on the ground. I preferred standing." Who do you think was the toughest of them all? Drop your answer in the comments.